Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. So here's the situation. A neighbor of mine, my dog, Greta the Leonberger. By the way, if you're not following Greta the Leonberger on Instagram, you need to be doing that. She's at Greta the Leonberger. They have a new dog. They adopted a dog that came up from Houston, and it's a pretty active dog, and so they've been asking if Greta could come over and play, and we've been doing that. And that led to, because I often take Greta to Chatfield State Park, where there's an off-leash dog park, I often take her there to play. So I've asked this neighbor, who is, she's married, 2 young kids. They're in their, I would say, mid-40s or so. And so she and I have on Saturdays and Sundays generally taken Greta and then their dog out to Chatfield so they can run and play and see the other dogs and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point of the story is she and I have been spending some time together. And, of course, you guys know me, I'm cross-examining her because these neighbors haven't lived there that long, but they've lived there long enough that we actually should know more about them than we do. They live just slightly down from us, so it's not like they're their, next door neighbors across the street that we know really well, or the ones that used to live next to us. Long story short, I'm just getting to know this woman, and so I'm cross-examining her as we walk along with the dog. I'm asking about, where'd she grow up? Where'd she go to school? What does she do for a living? What does her husband do? Why did they decide to get a dog? Where did they rescue the dog? Why did they pick this particular dog? And so we've been doing that now for about 3 weeks. And for the first time on Sunday, yesterday, we had put the dogs back in the car and we were leaving, and she was talking about how her husband, who often has to travel to California on business, was talking about the price of gasoline in California. And if you pay cash for your gas, it's about $4.10. And if you pay with a credit card, it's easily $4.30 or more for a gallon of unleaded premium gasoline. And somehow that conversation turned to Pacific Gas and Electric, which you may know is in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And they have been doing these blackouts through California because of their fear that they will start another Camp Fire. The Camp Fire is the one that occurred, I think now 2 years ago, that destroyed Paradise and so many of those places. I mean, it was a horrific fire. And we've since discovered that the fire was created by a spark from an outdated transmission line that was supposed to have been replaced. But if I remember the story correctly, and I may be off a little bit, they didn't replace these particular transmission lines because they considered the old-style transmission lines to be somewhat of a historical relic. Yeah, a transmission line. So let's not replace something that is transmitting Lord knows how much electricity through the dry areas of the Santa Barbara Mountains or wherever I forget where Paradise was, but wherever it was. We're not going to replace those lines. Now, of course, now with PG&E being in bankruptcy, they're certainly not going to replace the lines now. And their solution is, instead of upgrading the infrastructure, let's just cut off the power. So when she mentioned that, I casually said, well, what I find extremely funny, and I knew I was venturing into territory that was going to either go off the rails or lead to a rational discussion or lead to one of those situations where it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right, and she agrees with everything. Well, it was somewhere in the middle, and she was deferential enough or a little obtuse enough that I'm not quite sure what her politics are. But the conversation went something like this. When she was talking about the rolling blackouts, I made the comment that what I found funny is that all of the people, let me back up a second. But before I say what I'm about to say about solar, those of you who've listened to the radio program know that in the past I have endorsed a solar panel company. And I did that because I vetted them. I looked at them. I looked at their business model. I looked at how they do business, and I really liked these guys. And I decided that it would be unique to endorse a solar company on the Michael Brown Show on iHeartRadio. Well, we did such a fantastic job for them that they grew and grew and grew to the point that somebody else finally bought them out. And of course, so they're no longer advertising. I say all of that to say this. I'm not opposed to solar panels. And in fact, this particular solar company, they had come to me and said, we'd like to put solar in your house. We'll give you a discount. We'll do it for you at cost. But I wasn't ready, one, to spend even at cost the amount of solar, panels that I would need to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish on this house in suburban Denver. And I certainly didn't want to go to the additional expense of putting in generators and power storage systems and everything that I would need so that if the power went down, I could truly live off the grid based upon stored solar energy or based upon whether it's a diesel generator or any other kind of generator that would produce enough power to at least keep the freezer full of meat frozen and give me access to the internet, maybe access to radio and television. The rest of it, you kind of really don't care about. If you don't have air conditioning, you can survive. And if you don't have heating, well, unless it's 19 below zero, you can actually kind of survive that in a suburban America house today. But my whole point was, I put it off because I would much rather do it at the undisclosed location. One, not quite as expensive. Two, there's an easier way to tie into the grid at the undisclosed location, believe it or not, even though it's isolated because of certain transmission lines, it's just easier to do it there. So I put it off, ended up not doing it because obviously the company got bought out and that kind of deal went away. So back to the conversation yesterday at Chatfield. I said the thing that I find funny is this, that those who think that they're doing something to save the environment by putting on solar panels have now discovered the ugly truth about solar. The solar panels can generate all the electricity that it can, depending upon the capacity of the solar panels and how many panels you have and everything else. But what do you need? You need a way to either store that energy, which really is pretty unfeasible unless you're multimillionaire, or you got to tie it into the grid. And that's where most people get the advantage of solar, that they reduce their electric bill to virtually zero. In fact, in many cases, the electric company ends up paying you because of additional power, again, depending on your particular situation, depending on how much power you're actually putting into the grid that serves your home or serves your neighborhood. Well, the people in California are discovering when PG&E turns off the power, there is no grid. So all of the solar panels are worthless. There's no place for that electricity that's being generated. There's not a grid to feed it into. So they're finding that those solar panels are worthless. And I then made the statement because I'm trying to, again, you guys know me, I'm trying to lay a foundation for a conversation that I think might veer into politics a little bit. And I said, it's kind of like people that drive Priuses. And you've heard me say, I don't give a rat's ass if you drive a Prius. I don't care if you drive a Tesla. Here's what irritates me about people who drive hybrids or, electric powered vehicles. Don't tell me you're saving the environment, because you're not. Because those cars and those batteries still have to be manufactured, transported, and charged. And all of that involves fossil fuels. Every single bit of it involves fossil fuels. Oh, but Michael, if I'm recharging my Tesla with a solar panel somewhere, that doesn't involve fossil fuels. Oh, yes, it does. Because those solar panels had to be manufactured. And they were manufactured using fossil fuels. So I was telling my friend, as we're driving along, coming back to our respective homes, I said, the thing that drives me nuts about Prius, because she'd asked me if my BMW was a hybrid. I said no, and I didn't do it because I just really don't care. Two, I don't want to spend the extra money, and three, I don't do it because I don't believe that I'm doing anything to make the environment better. Whatever the delta is between the additional cost of a hybrid versus the cost of gasoline over the 2 years that I might keep this particular BMW, I'm not really sure it saves me any money or anything anyway. And I said, and the other objection that I have is every time I see a Tesla or a Prius or anybody else driving down the highway, because of the subsidies and the tax credits that they get for doing that, both at the federal and state level, that means that all the rest of us are subsidizing those people who want to feel good about themselves or trying to save money on gasoline. We're subsidizing those efforts. And I don't believe that the federal government or state government should be involved in doing that. The marketplace will find equilibrium, and if there is a market for hybrid or all-electric vehicles, the market will find those, and those will eventually be priced such that more and more people will buy it, and eventually it'll start taking off, and the trend line on that will slowly grow to where it starts growing exponentially greater and greater. So I thought that might lead to some conversation about politics, but it didn't. The only thing that I could get out of my friend, and I'll keep working on it, and I'll let you know how it goes. The only thing that I could get out is that she's so tired. Does this sound familiar? She's so tired of all of the, what she says are just, she referred to them as bullet points. Just the bullet points that everybody spews out, regardless of the question, that you never hear any in-depth discussion of public policy. Now, this woman is a professional. She has a graduate degree. She works in a professional medical office. And so she's not a dummy. She's a smart woman. So her response to me was, I've just checked out. I try to pay attention, but I can't do it anymore. I think that is part of the strategy of both parties. I think Donald Trump does it, one, to rally his base and to get the base all stirred up about impeachment, as he should. I think the left does it because I think they, to some degree, I think the base for the far left group of Democrat candidates is already pretty well stirred up. I'm not sure you can stir it up much anymore, but if you can, power to them. I don't really think that's what their goal is. I truly believe that the goal of the progressive left or the Marxist left at this point is to try to wear the rest of us down, whether we are just slightly left of center, whether we're moderates, we're fence straddlers, whether we're right of center, whether we're right-wing nut jobs, wherever we are on the political spectrum. I think the objective of the left is to try to wear us down. Not necessarily the candidates, but those in office now. Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, to some degree Barack Obama. All of them are simply trying to wear us down to make us just give up. And I think that's affecting the American psyche. And in fact, guess what? I have empirical evidence to that fact. An Iowa man is so bothered by the political climate that his psychologist says that he asked for a higher dosage of his anxiety medication. A Chicago woman is so uneasy about politics that she has needed 2 dental implants to deal with her teeth-grinding habit. And a New York woman says that she suffered her first flare-up of multiple sclerosis in 10 years, and she attributes that to her own political angst. A study published in September in the journal PLOS 1 found that politics is a source of stress for 38% of Americans. In a story in the Wall Street Journal, that journal says this. Not that journal, the Wall Street Journal, the PLOS 1 journal says, quote, "The major takeaway from this is that if our numbers are really anywhere in the ballpark, there are tens of millions of Americans who see politics as exacting a toll on their social, psychological, emotional, and even physical health, according to Kevin Smith, the lead author of the study and the chair of the political science department at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Now, I can make a joke about Cornhuskers here not knowing squat, but I'm going to avoid doing that. The study from Nebraska-Lincoln included 800 people in a nationally representative poll, and they asked them 32 questions. 32 questions. We'll get to that in a minute. But here are the findings. 11.5% say politics has adversely affected their physical health. 18.3% say they've actually lost sleep because of politics. 26.4% say that they have actually become depressed when a preferred candidate lost. 26.5% say politics has led them to actually hate some people. And 20% say differences in views have damaged a valued friendship. Stop it, people. Just stop it. I want to go back to the percentages for a minute with a little parenthetical commentary. 11.5% say that politics has adversely affected their physical health. You know, you've heard me maybe talk about Dr. William Glasser in the past because that's someone who Tamara has studied under regarding his choice theory, and it's what she uses when she counsels rugrats in elementary, middle, or high school. And she teaches these kids about the choices that they make, and that if they choose to engage in a fight, or they choose to bully, or they choose, it's all about making choices in life. Well, if 11.5% say that politics has adversely affected their physical health, can I just say this? I think those 11.5% are choosing to let politics adversely affect their health. The same is true with the next one. 18.3% say they've lost sleep because of politics. If you're losing sleep because of politics, turn off the television. Even for a day, a couple of days, turn it off. Why do you think, those of you who listen to me on the radio show, why do you think, and I know this irritates some people, but I think most people find it refreshing. I don't do, whether I'm doing 2 hours or 4 hours a day on the radio, I try to make certain, unless there's something, topic A in the news that is going to require me 2 hours to really get in depth into that particular topic, such as the history of impeachment or something. I try to intersperse topics about politics with topics about culture, with topics about everyday life or business, because those are the things that should truly matter to us. I'm not saying that politics shouldn't matter to us, but we got to keep politics in balance. We've got to keep the fact that, yes, this is a political battle. It has become a full-on contact sport for many Americans. It's a full-on contact sport for me because I believe the future of the country is at stake. But you know what? I can also know when to step away from it. I'll give you a personal example. So many nights, because I'm a horrible sleeper. I have to drug-induced sleep. Sometimes I will, and I know this isn't helpful, but I do it anyway. Sometimes I will listen to different podcasts. Some are tech podcasts, some are political podcasts, some are just off-the-wall podcasts. But one thing I will not do is on Friday nights. And I don't know why Friday nights. Maybe it's just because by the end of the week, having spent, 10 hours or how many hours a week I've spent on radio plus the podcast talking about politics, the last thing I want to do on a Friday night is listen to somebody talk about politics, talk about the debates, talk about whatever. I don't want to hear it. So I always make sure that the podcast that I might go to sleep listening to is a discussion about some unusual stories, a crime story, a story that there's an NPR podcast called 99% Invisible. It's just these odd stories. And I do that. And then, of course, on the weekends, I'm listening to music and other things. I turn the politics off. And I generally turn it off until Sunday when I start again thinking about show prep and the podcast and everything else. And then I start tuning back into it. Maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. 26.4% say they have become depressed when their candidate loses. If you become depressed when your candidate loses, I can understand being upset. When Barack Obama won for the first time back in 2008, I wasn't depressed. I was actually scared. I was nervous for the future of the country. a guy that tells me he wants to fundamentally transform the United States of America. And if you had read any parts of his autobiographies, you know this guy was a true Marxist. I was angry and scared, but I didn't become depressed because I just knew we had to fight. 26.5% say politics has led them to hate some people. You know, I listen to these candidates, and I listen to what they say. And sometimes it makes me angry, but I don't know them. Unless I've actually had interactions like with Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I've had to deal with Nancy Pelosi in my past. I've had to deal with Jerry Nadler in my past. I've had to deal with Maxine Waters in my past. I've had to deal with Sheila Jackson Lee in my past. I've had to deal with Hillary Clinton in my past. I've had to deal with Chuck Schumer in my past. You get the drift. I could go on and on and on. Those people who I've actually had a one-on-one relationship with, I still don't hate them. But I have a different visceral reaction when they say stupid things or things that are opposite of what I believe in. Still don't hate them. Angry? Mad? Furious? Yes. But I don't really hate them. And I think if you're at that stage where you actually have come to hate somebody in your life because of politics, you need to reevaluate your priorities, because it is, again, I think politics is incredibly important. And I do believe the country is at a crossroads. So we have to fight this battle. But we have to remember that the battle we're fighting is with the useful idiots. And so those Marxists out there who think that, you know, some sort of guaranteed national income or Medicare for all or socialized medicine, we have to engage the idea, not the individual. Oh, I think the individuals are stupid. But me telling you that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or anybody else is stupid, in many cases, that's not true. In many cases, they're incredibly smart. They're smart in terms of elective politics. They may be stupid in terms of public policy, but don't call them dumb, because they didn't get to where they were because they're dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. And then this one, the 20% say differences in views have damaged a valued friendship. Come on. It's like, I want to bring this full circle now. So the woman across the street, our dogs are going to continue to play. And I'm going to continue to dig to find out where she is politically. She asked me the other day, because we really don't know each other that well, she asked me what I do. You know, what do I do for a living? And I talked to her about the radio program and the podcast, and I talked to her about my speaking engagements, talked to her about a book I'm writing, and that led to, well, how did you get into that? And, of course, then I had to talk to her about being the undersecretary and having worked for the Bush administration. And I thought that might set some bells off, but it didn't. So she's playing her cards very close to her vest. On one hand, I admire that. On the second hand, for me, it's a challenge, because she could tell me that she's a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I'm still going to go walk the dogs with her. You know why? Because, again, it's to my point about understanding why it is that somebody supports Bernie Sanders. Just listening for a while to find out what it is that she thinks and why she thinks that, because that helps me build my case better. I hope you're not in one of these categories. If you have the opportunity, the stories in the Wall Street Journal, it may still be behind the firewall, but often stories that are older are no longer behind the firewall. But if you go to your search engine, Wall Street Journal, and the headline is, "Today's politics may be bad for your health." My point is, if today's politics is bad for your health, do me a favor. Do your family a favor. Reevaluate how you're engaging in the political debate. Thanks for listening to this edition of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. You need to go to the iHeart app or to iTunes. And somebody the other day asked me, they were confused about the podcast. There are two different podcasts. There's Michael Brown Unplugged, which is what you're listening to right now. And then my producer takes every hour of the radio program and produces that and puts that up as a podcast. That likewise is available on either the iHeart app or the iTunes app. But if you, let's say you're on iTunes or you're on the iHeart app, if you plug in Michael Brown, it should show you both options, Michael Brown Unplugged and Michael Brown's Heck of a Show. And the same is true on iTunes, because I've checked it on iTunes. If you plug in Michael Brown Unplugged, it will show related podcasts, and right next to Michael Brown Unplugged is Michael Brown's Heck of a Show. I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to both of the podcasts, because, I'm just competitive, and I like to beat the other people at the iHeart station, and I like to grow my numbers on the personal podcast. So thanks for listening. Think about whether or not politics is affecting your health and reevaluate it. And I'd love to hear from you. If politics is affecting your health, shoot me an email, michaelbrown@iheartmedia.com. And in the subject line, put politics and health. Politics and health. Email me, michaelbrown@iheartmedia.com. Talk to you tomorrow.